Today we continue or resume, I think, the book of Micah. I think we're beginning Micah this week. And, the book of Micah presents sort of something along the lines of what Isaiah had been sharing with us. And this is kind of God's words addressed to the holy people, to the people of Israel itself. The book of Micah is a collection of speeches, of statements regarding punishment, of challenge, and of salvation attributed to the prophet Micah, and he was a contemporary of Isaiah, whom we have been reading. And one of the main kind of insights that we find in Micah is that being chosen by God does not ensure that the Jewish people are safe from their enemies. Being chosen by God, being elected, God's election of them as his chosen people. That's a term, of course, we should be familiar with because we encounter it a number of times, that Israel is God's chosen people. And because they are his chosen people, the standard for behavior is not lower than it is for the other nations that surround them. Israel would tend to fall back into the struggles, into the pagan worship, and unfortunately, often child sacrifices that were common in the Gentile nations. And so the bar for the moral behavior of the chosen people is not lower, but instead it is much higher. And I've sort of shared that for those people, when they refused to when they didn't follow the Lord, in some ways there's an element of sacrilege, because God had called them to the terms of the covenants he had made, and that God had made promises to them. They make promises to God. And so we have to kind of recognize that the calling that is higher than it would otherwise be, and that we're called to truly follow the Lord in every aspect of our lives. And of course that's difficult, not always easy to do. I do want to point out at the end of this reading we hear these words, "Only you have been told, O man, what is good and what the Lord requires of you, only to do the right and to love goodness and to walk humbly with your God." And walk humbly, live justly was the Episcopal motto of Bishop Roger Morin. God rest his soul. Bishop Roger Morin, who ordained me diaconate and priesthood. And his motto was live humbly and walk justly. And I couldn't help but notice that. Today in our reading from the Gospel, we're hearing about the sign of Jonah. And so some of the scribes and Pharisees say to Jesus, "We wish to see a sign from you." And then Jesus responds in a way harshly. Maybe it sounds kind of brutal. He says, "An evil and unfaithful generation seeks a sign, but no sign will be given it." And I couldn't help but think about advertising. I have this, when I came to the rectory, there was this tiny little television that I would need a magnifying glass to see, and I was like, I'm not going to deal with that. So I asked Father Mike if we could get a new TV for my room, and after talking about that, we actually got one, and which I selected, and the colors, and it's beautiful. The colors are brilliant. It's very new, and when advertisements come on, it's like sort of freaks me out a bit. Everything's exploding with color and vibrancy, and I was thinking about that. I was thinking about how ads on TV, like they really try to get your attention. They're very colorful and explosive, and the people here are asking for something like an ad. They're asking for something that Jesus is going to do to show them that his words are true. And I love Jesus' response here. He says, what have you been doing? What about the healings? What about raising someone from the dead? What about Lazarus? What about all the people that are hurt? And, one thing that we don't see as much in the Gospels is Jesus counseling people. We see him heal physical illnesses, but we know he also would have instructed people and shared advice that would have changed lives. Jesus is saying, what about all that? That points to the truth of what I'm saying. You don't need a 24-bit color image in the sky saying, Jesus is real, Jesus is great. You don't need all that. What you need is to believe. You need an act of faith. And so I pray that as we continue this week, the Lord will help us not to look for something big and flashy, but look at what the Lord is communicating to us in a humble way in our day, and those whose lives he wishes to touch. It will be in those quiet moments that God will really want to reach out to get our attention and ask us to be disciples.